sky. That's the masses.
Welcome back to Give Me Some Truth International Edition. Dis-moi la vérité, dites-moi la... Dame la verdade, right? Portuguese, something like that.
Close enough.
Yeah. I haven't figured out the German yet. I'll have to ask about that one. But welcome back to Give Me Some Truth International Edition. Today, we're going to kind of do what you might consider like a 101 podcast. Starting about, if you're someone who's thinking about moving abroad, retiring abroad, going abroad, working abroad, any of these kind of things, when should you start your financial planning? And unsurprisingly, our answer is as soon as possible, obviously. But we're going to get into why that might be the case, the various things that you can start taking care of, things that you can look at, and kind of our experiences with that. One of the things I would say that, moving abroad requires is a visa. We can't help you with that, but we can help you get, financial documents in line and so on and so forth. But one thing people forget is, people complain about how inefficient the United States government is, but, compared to the rest of the world, we're lickety split in a lot of cases.
Right. I don't think there's any doubt that while we don't participate directly in the immigration process, that I have on many occasions, and I'm sure you have as well, provided documentations or letters that basically outline, the source of one's funds, an income stream, if you will, that has been useful for clients to set up residence country bank accounts, but also immigration.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And, it helps with immigration. Golden visas are starting to decline. I don't know if viewers saw the article in the New York Times, but, golden visa programs are starting to kind of dry up in certain areas, but they can help in helping with the immigration process and moving abroad and that sort of thing. And having a source of funds is going to be, a big deal no matter where kind of you're moving, because they don't want you to show up and become suck on public funds, right? So that's an area that we can help provide guidance. We can get you the documents. Many times we have the ability and resources to get those converted into euros, but also sometimes translated as well for our clients, depending on the language and so on and so forth. So it's something that we can help our clients get set up and move forward. And it really expedites the process. So it's one reason why getting started early can be helpful. In addition to the fact that many times, there are waiting lists for visas, waiting lists to see the consulate, waiting lists upon waiting lists. One thing, I think it's the French only, and it's too bad Sil isn't here so I can, have him silently agree with me. I think the French consulate is open from 9:30 to 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, something like that. So, it's a much more drawn out process. When I remember when I was going there to teach, we were being invited by the French government. It still took 6 or 7 months to get the visa all processed and straightened out and all that fun stuff. So it takes time.
Love takes time. And so does immigration. Yes. I think, the question about, when to start financial planning, at its elemental level, you're here in the United States and you're about to take one of the bold steps in your life, right? Steps that you and I have both taken in the past and may again in the future. I always like to leave that optionality out there. Anyway, at its elemental level, before you're already somewhere else, don't you want to know, and before you've even made that final commitment to be somewhere else, don't you want to fully understand the financial implications of that decision?
Yeah, and
call me crazy, but it's kind of good to know, like, financially, how are my obligations going to change? Are there little annual streams of money that are going to go to different places that I hadn't even thought of, right? And basically, you know, am I doing the right things with my nest egg that are going to work where I'm going, or am I going to need to make substantial alterations to that nest egg?
Yeah.
And what's that going to cost, right?
Yeah.
Because, even in the good old USA, right, taxes matter. Right?
Yeah. And I think this is a perfect case where, and we're going to talk about, kind of a couple of things. One is, first of all, people may go into this thinking that everything they've done in the United States is going to work perfectly where they're moving, and that's not the case. The other thing that people oftentimes, go into is certain stereotypes about certain countries' tax obligations and so on, and they may find out those aren't true, or, aren't necessarily the case, or they're different than they understood them.
Right.
And, I think a perfect example of this all the time is people don't consider France as a place to retire because they think, oh, the French taxes are so
crazy.
high.
Yes, crazy.
But as an American, actually, it's one of the more friendly places that you can go in a lot of ways. There will be some tax that you'll have to pay, but, for retirees, it can be a great place, and lots of things fit very well that you've done here in the U.S. that you would take there. Certain other countries that have a reputation maybe for being lower tax or more business friendly, I think of Germany, can actually be very complicated places to move for a couple.
Yes.
In terms of tax planning and so on and so forth. So,
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think, over the course of time, and this is timely because I just heard yesterday that every major currency has fallen against the U.S. dollar for the year.
Yep.
And somehow that's like, shocking and a wake-up call. But that tends to have been the case, maybe not every 6 months, but it tends to have been the case over the last 13 years.
Yep.
Right? Since the Great Recession.
Yep.
And believe it or not, you may need to consider, changes to your account today, even if you're doing the right things to minimize the foreign taxes that you're going to owe in the future, right?
Yep.
Simply because of currency change. And I'm sure there are very few people that cognizantly, home gaming this, doing it on their own, are truly taking that into consideration.
Yeah, well, and I think, for planning in terms of tax, if your Roth account isn't going to work in the country that you're going to, what are you going to do with that Roth account? How are you going to treat it? How are you going to move forward? Some countries give you a couple of years grace to handle those. Others, you're up and running right when you get there. So
Right.
That is a case where pre-planning, comes in.
Another great example, if you're going to move to a country where it turns out Roth isn't going to really work, probably not a good idea to do a dramatic Roth conversion right before you leave.
Yeah.
But we've seen that, right?
Yep.
I've seen it.
Yep. And people then go, what?
Yeah.
And these are, and you get yourself into hot water without even thinking about it. So I think reaching out, to us, can help you avoid these mistakes where you don't realize that not everything that you're doing retirement wise is going to work everywhere. It can also help you narrow down. Some people say, well, I'm looking at we had a great vacation in such and such country, and I was looking online, and it seems like it's pretty friendly, for retirees, but I don't speak this language. What about X country? And we can help fill you in and guide. And we've worked with clients to kind of, based on their situation, find the ideal destination among 3 or 4 countries,
Right.
that they're looking at. And so that, comes in handy. That's one of the first things. The other thing is, this is where kind of stereotypes come in. People who have moved abroad recently have lived in a world where the dollar has strengthened year in, year out. The U.S. market has been the best place in the world. We're currently living in the longest duration of a strong dollar that we've seen, right?
Yeah.
In our lifetimes, and the longest domination of the U.S. market over the rest of the world in our lifetime, and in since they've been keeping records. And so one of the things as well, our job is to help, wave our hands and get you away from that recency bias.
Yes.
And, if you're going to be spending money in euros, look at this as an advantageous time maybe to move some money into other parts of the world, because with a strong US dollar, you're buying cheaper, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's an affordable relative from a currency standpoint. It's a very affordable time to leave. And if you're an American with largely U.S.-based investments or a U.S.-centric portfolio, that nest egg looks mightier when you convert it to foreign currency, even mightier than it already does. So good job.
Yeah, but that could change.
Exactly.
And our job is to help you plan out for that and think about that. One thing, if you're moving abroad for work, the currency conversation changes a little bit. But if you're moving abroad as a retiree, that Social Security is coming to you in US dollars. It's coming to you, and we'll focus on the Eurozone because that's where a lot of people are looking. But, that right now it's going 10 or 20% farther than it did even 5 years ago in terms of currency value. Well, that's not going to last forever. Eventually that will shift for a variety of reasons. And what you'll see is all of a sudden it gets a little bit more expensive. You look back in history, the lost generation in the 1920s, why did they all move to France? Well, the little bit of remittance money they were getting went a lot farther in France, in the 1920s than it did in the United States, in Paris. It's
great
why,
U.S. stock markets in the 20s too.
Yeah.
How
But
did that end?
yeah. Well, it didn't end well anywhere in the world, but leaving that aside.
Fair enough.
But it's some of that recency bias that what we're trying to do is help our clients who want to move abroad for, the next 10 or 20 years, set themselves up so if and when that currency flips, they've, prepared themselves, right? And that's something that you can do now as well.
Yeah, and one of the I think one of the pain or pressure points that leads a lot of people to reach out to us in the first place, Keith, would be, hey, I'm in country X and my brokerage doesn't want me anymore. They're kicking me out. Believe it or not, your choices are more palatable on where you should have your money custodied in the United States, your retirement accounts and your taxable accounts, before you leave. In fact, if you come to us earlier in the process, there's a fair chance that there are options available to you that will work once you move abroad that aren't available to you once you've moved abroad or weeks before you move abroad even. So without getting into the details of that, because I don't think it's necessary, that's a whole that's a big point for expats, as the U.S. Residence-based taxation coupled with the passive foreign investment company rules mean that you can't go be native. You can't open up an account in London and start buying a bunch of
Vanguard Ireland ETFs,
EU-based or any non-US based ETFs, mutual funds, private equity funds, hedge funds. You just can't own any of those things. Or Uncle Sam is going to show you a tax regime that looks more like Denmark on its worst days, right?
And and that you also
it's going to be the great halving of your wealth.
You also highlight another issue there, right? Punitive tax from the U.S. There is, if you want to go truly native, if you want to give up your U.S. citizenship, or if you're returning to your country, there's something known as the exit tax.
Yes,
and that's something that can be managed if you're thinking about it ahead of time.
Yes.
But if you're not, and you're just like, I'm going to go and I'm going to give up my U.S. citizenship, or I've been here, I've been a green card holder, and I'm going to move back to my home country, you're not going to be able to do that so clean and easy if, you've been here for a certain amount of times and so on, and you may be subject to the exit tax. And the exit tax is something that you can work around
Yeah.
and plan for and, set things up, especially if you're, if you're a retiree, if you're a green card holder. There are things that you can do to help minimize your risk.
Bravo to you, Keith, because this is another big topic, right? Is the notion of people who've come to the United States and done well with employment and so on, and now they're ready to retire, and they yearn for the old country. And this albatross of citizenship-based taxation, can mean, just a lifetime of a more complex, formula for your financial planning, because you've got two sets of rules to follow. And for those people returning to their old country, expatriation can be an attractive option, but expatriation is a delicate process. It's a sophisticated process. You're going to need some help understanding the rules and how it works. And if your nest egg is big enough, you could really, really, really save fistfuls of money by planning out some strategies that we're not talking about months. We're talking about over 2, if not 3 tax years, right?
Yep.
So this is something, if you're listening to this and you think that this might apply to me, you need to be thinking, way ahead of that final retirement date, right? As a possibility of, hey, maybe I'll engage some expertise. That's not going to only provide me, experienced financial planning advice with the knowledge of, the tax rules and the regulation and the reporting, but it's going to be able to quite literally help me avoid one of the larger tax bills that might otherwise come my way in my lifetime.
Yep. No, absolutely. And we've actually done a 3-part series, podcast series on the exit tax. So, take a look and check that out in our archives on YouTube or on our website. I think that's a good place to go. I think we've, just begun to scratch the surface of some of these things. We talked about Roth conversion maybe not being a good idea if you're moving abroad. One thing a traditional financial advisor may do, and it's in the news here with the, various fiduciary rules on retirement plans. They may, if you're working for the U.S. government, they may tell you to roll over your, U.S. government savings plan
topic
over to an IRA, which in the U.S. doesn't make too big of a deal.
It's a non-tax event.
Yep. But if you're going to certain countries that have tax treaties with the United States that exempt government pensions from local tax, it's a huge and somewhat costly mistake. And it's a case where we don't necessarily get paid on saving you that money. It's something that we do because we have a fiduciary obligation to our client to protect them in these cases.
That's right. And that is, yet another shining example of, our ability to have a major financial impact on clients through planning advice that is not necessarily, directly, investment strategy.
Yeah, and to be quite honest with you, because we work with so many international clients, we can tell their tax preparers, hey, did you do this for your client, both in the U.S. and in whatever country you're in? Because in a lot of cases, tax preparers don't necessarily have the experience in these situations or looking at these things or looking through these things.
Right.
And so we, in addition to, the direct things, we can, help you save money in the long run on taxes and so on, in addition to any investment guidance that we're providing that can keep your investments compliant and flexible wherever you go in the world. We haven't even touched on certain countries don't want your ETF portfolio. You have to have a
Correct.
individual stock and bond portfolio. And if you show up with an ETF or mutual fund portfolio, you're going to end up with higher taxes. So
Right.
I think we've just started scratching the surface. Hopefully this has whetted your appetite, that if you're like, boy, in 2027, I'm getting ready to move somewhere, and maybe I should, get started on the financial planning now and sign up with somebody now. Hopefully this has kind of whetted your appetite. Do also want to say, even if you're 3 months away, it's not too late, and we can, still help you prevent some bad decisions.
We could always, obviously we can
Or
always
if
help,
you're
right?
if
If you're already there.
yeah, if you're
right?
already there, yeah.
Just the certain money saving or strategically shrewd things simply cannot be done by the time you've reached a certain stage. So the earlier, the better. And one thing that obviously takes time is any time that you involve lawyers, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't even said the word estate planning
Yeah.
in this, which
Yeah.
is a whole other can of worms. But
Yeah.
just
No, I was
just to say, never move to another country without having your estate plan or your lack of estate plan, right? Looked over by somebody who knows, what they're doing, right? Because new rules are going to apply to the way that you share your wealth during your lifetime and when you die. So this is yet a whole other reason why, taking action before those new sets of rules apply is a really, really good idea.
Yeah,
We'll
no,
leave
I
it
mean,
as simple as that, right?
I think it's, the classic example of what is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in
We're
financial
trying to keep you
planning.
from getting pounded, literally.
Yeah, and it gets exaggerated even more when you're dealing with two, tax systems. So hopefully you found this intriguing, and you'll reach out wherever you are in your expat journey, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some advice. Thanks for listening, and join us again soon for another episode of Gimme Some Truth International.
Bye-bye.
Wagner Condon Financial Advisors is a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The opinions expressed by the participants of this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Wagner Condon Financial Advisors. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. The information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Viewers are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.
You gotta leave your money behind you. Raise your hand to the sky. Ask the masses for silence.